Next up, we're going to try the rhombus with a 45-degree angle. If you haven't already watched the 30, 60, 90 video, I think that one went pretty well for me. Hopefully it went well for you too. Well, again, I'm going to start with a segment. Now, if I'm making a rhombus, what's a rhombus? Remember, that's a quadrilateral with 4 congruent sides. A square is an example of a rhombus, but since we need a 45-degree angle, that's not quite what we're looking for. Well, a couple of the elements I need to think about, I'm going to need sides that are exactly the same length as the one I'm starting with. So congruent segments are definitely something I'm going to have to know how to construct. It's one of the easier things to construct. Maybe a little trickier is a 45-degree angle. It helps to think that a 45-degree angle is actually half of a 90-degree angle. So if I'm going to make a 45-degree angle, I guess first I need to start with a 90-degree angle. And in order to do that, I need to stretch my segment out some. Because again, I'm going to need to do a perpendicular bisector. In order to do that, I need to know, well, I need one of these endpoints where I'm going to make my angle to be the midpoint of a segment. So I'm going to take that measure with that little arc and put it in down here. Ooh, barely long enough. Well, now this is the midpoint of this longer segment, and a perpendicular bisector is going to give me a right angle. Now I don't want a right angle in my rhombus, but I want half of that right angle. So I'm going to make my football. Don't really need the whole football, really just a little X up here on top would do it, but I wanted to do the whole football because that's one of the more familiar things for us. So here's going to be my right angle. But I don't want the whole right angle, I want half of it, so I need to bisect it. How do you bisect an angle? This is probably one you looked up on YouTube. Not sure how my videos are going to compete with YouTube, but hey, hand being in the way can't be helpful. So when I draw this, first I'm going to give myself a reference arc. It doesn't really matter how big that arc is, as long as it's consistent on this side and on that side, because I need a same distance to reach here and here. And then what I'm going to do, any setting I want to again, we're going to come out here, I'm going to make a little X. Come out here and make a little X. It's going to be the same distance from one side of that arc, or where one side of that arc crosses my 90 degrees, as it does over here from the other part of my 90 degrees. Might need to come back here and fix this one up. I didn't quite stretch it out long enough to finish my X. There we go. Well, that's going to be a point on a ray that comes exactly halfway through. So that's going to cut my angle in half. So there we go. We've got our 45-degree angle. Well, now I need to finish making this into a rhombus. Well, to finish making this into a rhombus, I'm going to need this length right here to be the same as this length here. If I was really clever, I guess I would have set to make this little X the same length as that, but I wasn't that clever, so I guess I got to measure it now. Get that length, and maybe just swipe it up through here. I was pretty close, wasn't I? But that gives me my other endpoint right there. Maybe I'll put that in blue so we can see that a little better. Well, I've got 2 of the 4 sides of my rhombus built. How am I going to get my other side of the rhombus? Well, probably the next easiest one to do is this side right here. It's going to be parallel to that, which means the angle of the rhombus isn't going to be 45, but on the outside, the exterior angle would be 45. So if I can copy this angle over here, I should be able to finish my shape up pretty quickly. So again, I need a reference arc. From here, I've already got one. I just need to make sure I'm set to the same length on my compass. So that's that reference arc I drew a little while ago. And I'm going to make that same reference arc over here. Okay. Looks like I need to stretch my line out just a little bit. Make sure I cross through that reference arc. Now what? Well, now I just need to know how far this angle's open, and from this reference arc that we drew, which was not this one. Got a lot of arcs going on in this picture. It gets a little busy, but it was this reference arc right here. I want to know how far open the angle is, so I'm going to use my compass to get that measure right there. So how far open is that? Make sure I'm lined up right. It's like right about there. Put my little measuring line. Remember, you always want your measuring line there. Well, same thing goes over here. This shows me on that arc exactly where I need it to go through. I've got that curvy looking little X, and I can draw through that point and the end point of my starting segment. There we go. Well, how long does that segment need to be? Well, the same length as my starting segment. The segment length is this segment over here. So, whoops, that was a little long. That length right there. So now I've got it set to my length. I can mark off that length over here. Well, that's going to be the third vertex of my rhombus, and or my fourth. I guess these were the first two. That was the second one. These are the first two. That was the third one, and that makes that the fourth one. So the last side of my rhombus should be really easy to find. Just goes through those 2 points way up here. I've drawn them a little big, trying to make sure that goes through the center. And I'm going to go ahead and trace these sides so it shows up a little better with all of our reference arcs. You never want to erase your reference arcs when you're doing a construction, but every little bit, once we use it, there's a good chance we wanted to ignore it. We did revisit a few arcs over here. I probably could have made it a little bit cleaner by multitasking some of the arcs. For instance, this one that was giving me the length, I could have used that as my reference arc as well. But once I've drawn a reference arc, I don't want to go back and try to change it. So you may have been able to do this with fewer arcs than I used, but this certainly gave us our rhombus. Make a 90-degree angle, bisect it to get your 45 degrees. Once I've got that, make sure that I go the same distance as the other side out there. Make that same 45. Remember, this was 45 degrees over here, which makes this one 135. We didn't have to find 135 because we were able to find the 45. Mark off the same length and finish up our shape. And there's our rhombus with a 45-degree angle.